Cronos: The New Dawn is a third-person sci-fi horror game set in the distant future, where humanity has been wiped out. You must explore the ruins and jump back in time to find souls to harvest to uncover the truth about what happened. The game is available on PC, Xbox Series consoles, PlayStation 5, and the Nintendo Switch 2. Atmosphere. The world has died. You awaken in a pod with no idea of who you are, assigned a task that your character is determined to complete, but as the player, you don't fully understand, and you walk out into the misty, empty world with a mission to complete.
Traveler ND3576, initiating the travel log. Triangulating the fallen predecessor's last known location.
It feels like getting born, and though it might be a birth with a purpose, as you step out into the world, there's a level of uncertainty in the air. What makes up most of the atmosphere is the experience of walking through the fleshy nightmares of the future. The game is slow and plodding, and distances feel like great expanses, but the environments themselves provide a lot of feelings, from sadness and loss to just emptiness and death, with the inhuman growths that plague the dusty relics and ruins of destroyed and long abandoned homes, squelching underfoot as you trudge through filed dens of fleshy materials. The rest of the environments are near enough derelict. It's like the world's just stopped some time long ago. And the mystery of what happened pervades, as the very earth is torn asunder and floating in a strange anti-gravity. There's an eerie quiet to the future, which only becomes more unsettling when that silence ends, with the groaning and gurgling of monsters lurking in the dark. Some areas feel more electric than others, like the underground crypt and parts of the hospital are both ancient and maze-like respectively, but the game's atmosphere doesn't change that much throughout the game in general, being pretty consistent throughout. Some parts of the game really do tend to drag on a little, with the second journey to the train station power grid being the weakest and least justified part of the game. The atmosphere also changes when you travel to the 1980s, where the world seems not so broken, but there's still an electric tension that you might be found somewhere that you're not supposed to be. But at the end of the day, the atmosphere is still very solid. That's one Harry Mason.
Maybe he's holding her somewhere, doing God knows what to my girl. Lord have mercy. Will you help me? Will you bring her back to me? I'm so worried about her.
Scares. Cronos: The New Dawn is fairly reserved with its scares. They are surprisingly few and far between, with very little time spent trying to frighten the player in favour of leaving you to soak in the atmosphere, with the 12-hour game really only trying traditional jump scares maybe a handful of times. The jump scares definitely worked when they were first introduced, but they were hindered greatly by the game's difficulty, which could force you into experiencing the same thing multiple times and rendering it more of an annoyance than anything else. The combat and dealing with various enemies had the jump scare effect, with Callisto-like entities that grabbed you from their holes in the walls and drained a bit of your health if you walked into an area unaware, as well as enemies that acted like proximity mines, exploding and leaving harmful acid on the floor. The combat's main trick was that enemies could absorb the corpses of other enemies and get stronger, which was an interesting mechanic in small groups but evolved into a tiring one when the enemy count exceeded 7 or 8, combined with how frankly stingy the game was both for inventory space and how much ammo you could have, it teetered dangerously on the edge between exciting, engaging combat and a chore, as things got hopelessly out of control and you ran out of ammo to deal with it. Between the combat experience bordering on tiring and the general lack of attempts to frighten the player, it really didn't seem like there was anything to be frightened of. That's still one Harry Mason. Sound design. The game's sound design is full of details and little things, from the sounds of machines beeping and whirring to the intricate clicks of the guns reloading and weapon switches, down to the tearing and crushing sounds you hear with flesh being separated as you stomp on a corpse. The detail is sickeningly realistic, almost too much, but in the game's sparse sound environment it all stands out. These sounds echo down the dusty, empty halls. The apocalypse is quiet, and only the plodding soundtrack which slides in and out really keeps you comfort in these times. The musical pieces that stand out the most are the metallic and cold synths, which add more loneliness to the save rooms, but the rest of the game varies from ethereal choirs with bells and clanging metals to deep dark synth pulses and drones, synths that sound ancient in design, like time itself being played on a keyboard. The soundtrack can be both hauntingly beautiful and devastatingly empty, menacing, but sometimes on rare occasions, there's a sliver of hope.
Search for the dive point. Something is interfering with my readings. My sensors go haywire whenever I get close to the church buildings.
The character voices in terms of modulation is really fun, but the actual delivery is very deliberate, which can lead to some lines feeling lackluster regardless. The human characters sound pretty much fine in terms of voice acting, with the only thing that really lessens the experience being the characters' animations not really matching the tenacity of the words that they're using. The sound design, however, is really immaculate, achieving and overachieving in many different ways. It never does anything unique, but it excels at every turn. That's 2 Harry Masons. Gore. The gore is pretty prominent in certain parts of the game, like the hospital where the fused remains of human bodies are clumped together as X-rays on the walls show a cranium seemingly growing out of a chest cavity. There's giant hearts and flesh pits, viscera and all sorts of assorted biological matter growing on the walls. There's also blood as you shoot the monsters, and stomping on their corpses or getting hit yourself results in a blood spray over your suit. There's a satisfactory amount of it in the game, it's fitting, and it never becomes too much or too little based on the game's story. That's 3 Harry Masons. Story. After your birth or creation from the pod, you're left to wander with the only goal being to find your predecessor and carry the torch for this mysterious collective. The game's story is confusing in places due to the overall lack of information for more important things, like the collective and the vocation itself, and there's a lot of long breaks between main story points. It's really not too difficult to forget interactions, since they can be pretty sparse, which can sometimes wane on what your goals actually are. What keeps the story going are the audio recordings and the notes. The notes can be from any source whatsoever and all feel sort of vague. They add to the lore and explain certain details about life just before humanity was wiped out, with conditions on the quarantine and various pieces of information on rebellions and other things. It paints a paranoid and unpleasant time with a 1980s setting bringing up its own political situations that adds to the backdrop. The audio recordings, on the other hand, are all made by travelers like yourself and mark the journeys they made before you. A lot of these are really well done, but still fairly vague, with the language they use not always being clear. But it shows the levels of faith and uncertainty your own people displayed as they faced the wastes to try and save humanity. There's a lot of environmental storytelling in certain parts of the game, with environments showing the horrible conditions at the steelworks and hospital, with how overrun the latter was with patients. A lot of it is of course partially explained through cutscenes, though this is usually the most confusing way to receive information, as other characters don't really want to explain anything to you clearly, and most of them are hiding something. Despite all this, the story of time loops and time travel was at least interesting from the parts I could take away, though it ended up being very murky and unclear. The notes especially felt like they doubled down explaining the same thing, but the story revelations you get near the end of the game seem more designed to allow for a new Game Plus experience to carry the torch and allow the story to make more sense a second time round. Making the final score 4 out of 5 Harry Masons. Cronos is now probably my favourite Bloober Team game, which sadly isn't saying much. It's a clear amalgam of Resident Evil, Silent Hill and Dead Space and fits nicely in the middle of a Venn diagram, but I still wouldn't find it as pleasing as any of those games individually. That being said, the only real issue I had personally with the game was its length and progression, which felt extremely slow. It was otherwise pretty great. Again, I'd like to remind you the whole thing is down to my opinion of horror games. If you don't share this opinion, then that's cool, I get it. I'd like to point out that whilst I did what I could for the vocation, I didn't give in to the collective and advise you don't either. There will be more horror reviews in the pipeline, and thanks for watching. And always go check out Bumps in the middle of the night. Peace.